Some women don't chase, and yet, they are never forgotten. They don't fight for a man's attention, don't beg for a seat at his table, don't cling to the edges of his life. And yet, when they are gone, they take something no one else can return. They don't demand, and yet, their absence echoes louder than their love ever did. It is not a sudden thunderclap of loss, it is the slow erosion of warmth, the quiet removal of a presence that once made the world feel more vivid. At first, he doesn't notice. The room still holds the same furniture. The air carries the same scents. The days move forward in their usual rhythm. But beneath it all, something subtle begins to shift. Laughter feels slightly emptier. Victories taste strangely hollow. A cold draft moved through spaces that were once alive with her warmth. Carl Jung wrote that what we repress becomes the shadow, the hidden, unacknowledged part of ourselves that eventually demands recognition. And when a woman withdraws her presence, she steps into that role in a man's psyche. She becomes the shadow in his life. The truth he has buried. The reflection he cannot bear to face. Her absence is not just the loss of her touch or her words, it is the removal of a mirror. Without her gaze, he no longer sees the man he imagined himself to be. And so her absence grows, until it is no longer the background, but the loudest thing in the room. She does not return to explain herself. She does not offer closure. She becomes a haunting without a name, and he begins to realize the silence is speaking far more than her love ever did. She is not cruel. She is not loud. She does not rage against his absence or rattle the cage of his attention. She is not chasing approval, for approval was never the currency she valued. She is the archetype of the withdrawn muse, the rare woman who once fed his ego without losing herself entirely, who softened his sharper edges without dulling her own spirit. She inspired without trying, nurtured without begging, and her presence carried the kind of grace that made him feel more than he was willing to admit. Now, she stands outside the walls of his psyche, not as a trespasser, but as one who has taken her leave. The loss does not strike him like lightning. It seeps in slowly, without fanfare, without a public scene. It is felt in the small moments, when his laughter suddenly rings hollow, when a victory feels strangely unfulfilling, when the night feels longer than it once did. To him, she is no longer a woman of flesh and breath. She becomes a symbol, an archetype rising from the unconscious. The anima figure Jung described, the feminine soul image within the masculine psyche, the bridge between his outer life and his inner depths. She was that bridge, an unspoken connection to parts of himself he did not know how to reach alone. She could touch what his own words could not name. And now, that bridge has burned, quietly, without a single spark escaping into the night. He is left not just with emptiness, but with the quiet terror of knowing he has lost the mirror that reflected the best of him, and that she will not return to rebuild it. At first, he tells himself it's nothing. Men trained by the armor of ego have been conditioned to believe in quick replacements, easy distractions, and the illusion of moving on. They tell themselves love is interchangeable, that a new face can erase the imprint of the old. But the unconscious does not obey the ego. It does not take orders. It does not recognize the logic of should or must. It obeys only the forces it has known the longest: memory, archetype, and wound. In the dim corridors of his mind, her absence begins to take shape. It is no longer a gap, but a ghost, a phantom limb. He finds himself reaching for her in thought, the way a man reaches for a glass that is no longer on the table. The motion is instinctive, but his hand closes on emptiness. That emptiness is undeniable. The Stoics have written that nothing external can disturb the soul except the judgments we attach to it. But he is not yet ready to face the truth. It is not the woman herself that unsettles him, it is what she carried into his life without effort. She was a mirror, and in her presence, he saw reflections of himself he could neither claim nor sustain alone. She showed him his capacity for tenderness, for depth, for a certain nobility that lay dormant beneath his defenses. Now, that mirror is gone, and he is left only with the unflinching surface of his own solitude. In the quiet hours, when distractions fall away, he feels the pull, not toward her body, not even toward her voice, but toward the man he believed he was when she looked at him. Jung knew that love often begins as projection. A man does not see a woman as she truly is, not at first. He sees her as a canvas for the qualities he has long buried in himself. Her softness becomes his unclaimed gentleness. Her mystery becomes his unexplored depth. Her intuitive knowing becomes the guidance he has silenced in his own mind. In the beginning, it is not her he loves, it is the reflection she offers. The image of who he could be, wrapped in her presence. She stirs a sleeping part of him, and he mistakes that awakening for love of the other, rather than recognition of himself. When she leaves, the projection collapses. The canvas is gone, and the image fades. But the absence does not free him, it binds him in a different way. Without her, he is forced to face a truth he would rather ignore. The qualities he adored have not vanished, but they are trapped inside him. They exist, yet remain locked behind doors he does not know how to open. She was never the source of these qualities, she was the key. Not to her heart, but to his own soul. And in losing her, he loses access to himself. This is the quiet cruelty of projection. The other person becomes both the gateway and the prison. He cannot reach what she revealed without confronting his own shadow. He must reclaim softness without her touch, mystery without her gaze, intuition without her voice guiding the way. Few men attempt it. Fewer succeed. And so they cling to the memory, not of the woman, but of the man they thought they were when she stood beside them. She does not return. She does not explain. She does not offer him the luxury of final words to soothe his unrest. There is no letter, no apology, no carefully crafted goodbye. Only silence. And yet, her silence is not punishment, it carries no venom, no bitterness. It is the stillness of someone who has seen the truth without flinching. She understands what he does not, her worth is not a bargaining chip for his awakening. She will not stay and barter her soul for his delayed self-awareness. She will not keep giving in the hope that he will suddenly see. Her absence is not the cold shoulder, it is the closing of a chapter. The quiet sealing of a door that will never open again. Trauma psychology tells us this: when the nervous system learns safety, it no longer clings to danger. It no longer waits for the storm to pass. It simply walks away from the storm entirely. She has learned. And now, she will not touch the flame that burned her twice. No matter how warm the memory of the fire, she remembers the cost. He may interpret her detachment as pride, as punishment, as something aimed at him. But it is not. It is simply her choosing herself. It is a refusal to bleed for a lesson that is not hers to learn. In her silence, she creates space. In that space, he is left alone with the echoes of her voice, her laughter, her presence. He will feel them grow louder in her absence, until they are all that remain, but she will not hear them. She has already stepped into a world where his shadow no longer reaches. Days pass. Then weeks. The initial confidence he wore, the belief that he could simply move forward, that her absence was nothing, begins to thin. He sees her in places she is not. A familiar silhouette on a street corner. The shape of her hair in the crowd. A flicker of her voice in the hum of a cafe. He turns, but she is never there. The mind is a master at creating ghosts when the heart cannot accept loss. And the more he tries to dismiss her, the more vividly she appears. At first, it feels like nostalgia. Later, it becomes a weight. He surrounds himself with noise. New conversations. New faces. New distractions. But these things only skim the surface. In the quiet moments, driving at night, staring at the ceiling before sleep, she returns with unbearable clarity. Not the warmth of her love, but the chill of her absence. This is where the ego begins to crack. Jung would say the unconscious has begun its rebellion, forcing the shadow to rise. All the parts of himself he avoided are now pressing at the edges of his awareness, carried into his mind by the ghost of her presence. He realizes, though he will never admit it, that he has lost more than a woman, he has lost a mirror. Without her, the image of the man he liked being has disappeared. And no matter how tightly he holds to the illusion of control, the fracture is there. The cracks spread slowly, silently, like ice breaking beneath the weight of a body. And once they form, they can never be unseen. A woman's silence can feel like a closed door. To most, it is rejection, an end. But there is a certain kind of woman whose silence is not an ending at all. It is a mirror, polished and still, reflecting truths the other person would rather not see. This is the individuated woman, the one who has traveled far enough into her own depths that she no longer confuses attention with worth. She understands that mystery is not something performed, it is something lived. It is the quiet power of knowing you are whole whether someone stays or leaves. He will misread it at first. He will think her silence is a game. That she is waiting for him to break. That her detachment is a strategy designed to make him chase. But she knows better, strategies belong to those still seeking control. She has no interest in control. She is interested only in alignment. Her absence, then, is not absence at all. It is presence redirected, inward. She has taken the energy once poured into him and returned it to herself, and in doing so, she has become untouchable in a way he cannot name. He feels the pull not because she is trying to be desired, but because she has stopped needing to be. The paradox is unbearable. The more she stands in her own orbit, the more his revolves around hers, and deep within, he begins to understand what disturbs him most. It is not the loss of her voice, her touch, or even her love. It is the loss of the version of himself that existed only in her presence, the man he thought he was when she looked at him a certain way. She knows this. She knows that what he yearns for is not truly her. It is the reflection she once offered, the one he cannot find anywhere else because it was never about her at all, it was about what she illuminated in him. The mystery, then, is simple: she is not hiding anything. She is simply no longer willing to give him the part of himself he refuses to claim on his own. And that is why her silence haunts him more than her love ever did. In time, he reaches a crossroad, though he may not recognize it as such. The ache has lingered too long to be dismissed as passing heartbreak. It has sunk into the marrow of his thoughts, slipping into dreams, stirring him at odd hours. Something deeper than memory is at work. If he wishes to find her again, even in thought, he must step into the place Jung called the shadow. It is not a romantic journey. It is not the hero's tale told in light and triumph. The shadow is a descent into all that has been denied, the weakness he hides beneath bravado, the longing buried under pride, the fear of being seen for what he truly is. Here, in the dim corridors of the self, there are no illusions. He is stripped of the version of himself she once reflected. Without her light, he must face his own darkness. The tenderness he adored in her now stares back at him as vulnerability, and he must decide whether to reclaim it or keep running from it. The mystery he loved becomes uncertainty in himself. The intuitive knowing she carried forces him to confront the ways he has silenced his own truth. If he dares to walk through, he might find that she was never the source of what he loved. She was only the catalyst, the living reminder of what he had exiled within. And in that revelation, the ache might soften. The obsession might fade. The attachment might loosen. But this path is not for most men. To claim what she awakened, he must dismantle the very armor that once protected him. And for many, that feels like death. So they choose the familiar instead, to carry her absence like a private wound. A wound they touch in the dark, but never heal. And she? She does not wait. She does not turn back to see if he will follow. The woman who has stepped out of another's shadow knows that the work of the soul is solitary. His darkness is his to face. Her path now leads only toward her own light. And what of her? She is no longer the mirror for a man's unfinished self. no longer the vessel into which he pours his unclaimed dreams. She has closed the chapter where her worth was measured by the attention she could hold, the depth she could offer, or the way her presence made someone else feel more alive. Now, she moves differently. Not with haste, not with bitterness, but with a quiet certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from seeing the truth and surviving it. The energy she once poured outward now flows inward, filling the spaces she once left unattended. The pieces of herself she abandoned to hold someone else's weight are gathered back into her hands. She wears them not as armor, but as adornment. She understands something essential now: love is not sacrifice when the cost is herself. Affection is not devotion when it requires her to shrink. She knows the difference between a bond that nourishes and a tether that drains. And she knows she will never again confuse the two. There is a stillness about her now that feels untouchable. Not because she is guarded, but because she is complete. She no longer fears absence, for she has lived inside it and found it to be fertile ground. In solitude, she has met herself fully, and found someone worth staying for. He might see her again one day, from across a room or across the years. She will be the same and yet unrecognizable. The woman who once fed his ego has become the woman who no longer needs to be remembered. And if he wonders why her presence feels different, why she seems further away even when she stands in front of him, it is because she has risen beyond the reach of his shadow. Her ascent is not a victory over him. It is a victory over every version of herself that forgot her own value. She walks now with the unshakable grace of someone who has chosen her own light, and left behind every hand that once tried to dim it. In the end, his longing is not for her, not truly. It is for the man he believed he was when she looked at him. The man reflected in the warmth of her gaze, the man who felt deeper, spoke softer, lived more vividly in her presence. He mistakes this for love of her, but it is only the ache for a self he cannot summon without her light. Her absence is the teacher he never asked for. It speaks without words, revealing truths he would rather keep hidden. That desire built on projection is fragile, that attention given without reciprocity is not love, and that the mirror she once held will never be returned. And still, the silence between them grows louder. It swells in the space where his pride once lived, filling it with a quiet he cannot break. He may chase, he may remember, he may even try to rebuild, but deep down, he knows, the door is closed, and not because she is cruel, but because she has walked so far into herself that she cannot be pulled back. Her detachment seduces precisely because it cannot be negotiated. It carries the magnetic weight of finality, the rare and irresistible power of someone who does not need to be wanted. And this is the truth she lives now. She is not the echo in his mind, not the memory in his chest, not the shadow in his dreams. She is something else entirely, a force moving forward, a life expanding, a soul unbound. Some men will never understand why her absence is louder than her love. They will tell themselves stories to preserve their pride, invent reasons to explain why she walked away. But the truth will sit quietly in the deepest part of them, surfacing in the still moments when the world falls silent. For her, there is no bitterness in leaving. Only clarity. Only the knowledge that she has nothing left to give where it is not received. The woman who walks away in silence isn't weak. She simply sees more. In the quiet arc of this story lies a truth both simple and difficult. Love is not proven by how tightly you hold on, but by how clearly you see yourself when you stand alone. The man learns, too late, that what he adored was not only the woman, but the part of himself she awakened. And the woman learns that her worth was never tied to being someone's mirror. She sees that absence can speak more powerfully than presence, that silence can protect what words would betray. This is the paradox of true detachment. When you no longer chase, you become unforgettable. When you no longer offer yourself where you are not met, you step into a realm beyond bargaining, beyond proving, beyond waiting. Her journey is not a victory over him, it is a reclamation of herself. His ache is not punishment, it is the echo of what he must find within. And so the moral is this: value the reflection you see in another, but never forget it was always yours to claim. Because the woman who walks away in silence does not vanish, she simply returns to her own light.